check, 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 boom, 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 camera 1, camera 2, mics, record. Let's do this in one take. All right, folks, so I got the new LN-EXO Gen 3 sitting in front of me, and I'm gonna go over the assembly, putting your iPad into the unit itself. So right here, we have the EXO Gen 3 case and docking cradle for the iPad Air 3. We have the quick release lock pin right here. Cradle pops off the back, slides down these rail bolts, and docks back in. Pin locks. So like anything, a little bit WD-40, breaking this thing in. We have amps pattern in the back for a RAM ball to mount that up to any RAM mount you may have in your vehicle. Most of these are getting mounted into a caged vehicle. So we have all kinds of arms, all kinds of brackets, and window mounts, and everything else you could dream of on the RAM website or on our website. You can get this thing mounted pretty much in anything. You could also direct dash mount this with the 2 screws you have here. In the future, you'll probably see a few more. This is one of our prototypes. You can see that we already mounted the ruggedized Apple power cable into the docking cradle. We already test fit it, make sure it powers up an iPad. I'm not gonna go over replacing this cable in this video, but basically if you pop these 2 screws out, pop these 2 set screws out, you'll see a pocket that's holding the ruggedized cable. And if you watch our other videos, you can see how we ruggedize stock Apple cables. So the first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna pop the top rails off the case. So then you can see the inside of the case. So we decided to go with no foam on the Gen 3 case. On the Gen 2 case, there was a foam insert that padded the iPad. In the Gen 3, we actually cut the tolerance of the case to the actual dimensions of the iPad. It's pretty much form fitted. On your iPad Air 3, when you sit it down in this pocket, you can see how tight it fits into the back case. Now you could install the iPad just like this into the case, but what we recommend doing is inside of your kit, there's a little bit of pinstriping, vinyl pinstriping. Case itself, as you can see, has pretty tight tolerance. Once you get the rails on, it does a pretty good job at sealing everything up. I would, bare minimum, put the tape on the bottom of the iPad to cover these speakers. Because if you're running the iPad in portrait mode, when it is in the cradle, you could get moisture or dust to run down and wrap its way around and get up into the speakers. But you can see the speakers on the bottom here. We're gonna use the vinyl tape to tape those up. We're gonna tape over the volume buttons because we don't use them. And we're gonna tape over the auxiliary port and the power button. And when you tape over the power button, we're just gonna apply the tape so the power button still functions. And you can see the volume buttons are taped over. Same way, the SIM card slot is taped. The bottom speakers are taped off, and that's it. Not only will this help provide water resistance and dust proofing to the actual internal components of the iPad, it also helps a bit in cushioning the iPad into the aluminum case. So now that we have everything taped up, we're going to go ahead, fit the iPad into the back of the case. While we have it here, we're going to test the power button to make sure the power button is functioning, and it is. We're going to put the top rail on so we can actually test that power button again to make sure everything's seated correctly. Okay, we're going to test that power button. Power button functions. All right, so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to put the side rails on. We're going to put the side rails on before the bottom rail, because if you don't, it gets pretty tight to fit those side rails between the top and the bottom rail. Now, I am going to dump the screws out of here to show you there's a right and wrong way to put on the side rails. If you notice on the actual rail, when it's on correctly, you got the smaller bevel cut on the inside of the iPad right here. You can see you got a bigger bevel on the outer edge. If you actually flip it over on the iPad side, you can actually see a bevel cut into the rail. This inner bevel is what actually grabs and holds the bevel of the iPad. So there's no pressure on the glass. If you put this on correctly, that angle groove will secure that bevel of the iPad down into the case. So you want to make sure you get that on the right way. So I'm going to put the screws back in. Screw those down. I'm just going to lightly screw everything down. We'll go back around and we'll tighten everything up when we get all the rails on. I forgot to mention, before you get this iPad into the actual case, if you are going to use an anti-glare or a screen protecting film, put that on prior to mounting the iPad into the case. It'll make your life a lot easier. All right, so I'm going to double check this side rail. I can see the beveled edge cut on the iPad side of the rail there. I'm going to make sure that's facing in. And we're going to tighten this left side down. All right, we got that in. Now we're going to go ahead and put the bottom rail on. All right, now we can go around and tighten up the rails. You don't want to over tighten them, but because you're grabbing the bevel and not the actual glass of the iPad, you're pretty safe. But just make sure they're all lightly snug going around. Like so. There you have it. So now we have the iPad mounted into the case. We're going to take the rail, line the rail up with the guide bolts, make sure everything's lined up on the bottom in the pocket, fit the iPad into the cradle, make sure that the locking bolt is lined up. If the locking pin is not engaging into the back of the case, meaning the hole in the iPad case is not lining up with the locking pin, well, we test fit that before it goes out the door, but maybe your iPad's sitting a little bit higher, sitting a little bit lower, maybe you did not use the vinyl tape, or maybe you did, and it's just not lining up perfect, or the fit's too tight or too snug. you can either loosen up these guide bolts to loosen up the cradle to see if it'll engage, or you can loosen up the docking cradle bolts, which will loosen up this top block and allow you to adjust the power cable up and down. So this right here is just a double set screw. I mean, really, once you get this thing fitted and you get these bolts tightened down, it's not really going to go anywhere. But if it is a hard fit into the bottom of the iPad, or if you're not getting dependable power and you want this thing to be really locked in, you can loosen up these cradle bolts a little bit, and you can drive this set screw up, which will push the power block upward. And once you get that snug, you can then go back and tighten up these cradle bolts. If it's too tight, you can go ahead and loosen up some of these bolts and do some adjustments in here to get this thing to loosen up a little bit on you. There you can see it's engaged. So that's it, the LN-EXO Gen 3 case and docking cradle for the iPad Air 3 running LEADNAV. You got the locking pin here, pulls it out, there it undocks. Line up the guides on the back, lock it into place. Make sure the pin is engaged, and there you go. That's it, we're done. Later, see ya.